Good evening, everybody. Lovely to be here. My name's Bryan. I work with Learnlife. I'm the research paradigm champion and also the Alliance Global Networks champion. I'm really pleased to be here this evening talking to you all, to be able to introduce our learning paradigm, the Learnlife learning paradigm that we put together over the last couple of years. And I would like to begin just with a bit of an overview of that paradigm, and then later on in the presentation, Adria, my colleague and good friend as well, is going to introduce how the paradigm moves from the conceptual framework into action. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen, and then I'll talk you through that. Okay. So guys, this is the new learning paradigm, and I'd like to, I guess, begin by saying that the learning paradigm is an open source, democratized, shared information document that is free access to everybody. So when you're part of the Learnlife Global Network, you have access to this framework. I'll just make sure I can move on to the next. Here we go. Okay, so the sort of concept really with the Learnlife paradigm is the whole idea is to positively change education together. We're building an open ecosystem that can do that. And really what we're looking to do, our mission and our aim is to empower learners, educators, schools, governments to use a new learning paradigm which focuses at the individual, purpose-inspired and personal learning experience level. And if you have a look at this visual you see here, this is the elements that we have in our paradigm. There's 21 of them, and I'm going to talk you through them now in a little second. I'll just go on to the next slide. So, I mean, this slide really is just trying to provoke a little bit why we need a new learning paradigm, why we need to move away from the traditional old system into something new. And I'm not going to read through them all. But I'm just going to point out a couple, and please feel free to read them in your own time. I'll hold this up for about 30 seconds. I guess, in my opinion, we need a new learning paradigm because I think 21st century sort of global environments require an education system that can keep up as society changes exponentially. Education system seems to be stuck in a past system that has been there for near 150 years. Even going back to the Industrial Revolution in Great Britain, that's where the sort of founding of the education system or traditional model that we know would have been starting off, and it hasn't really changed. So there's a definite need for that. And I guess, even from that, if you're looking through the phrases and ideas we've put down there, you can probably understand why there's issues with that system. And the last sentence I've written there is learner wellness around the world remains precarious, and I believe that a new learning paradigm can help alleviate the global wellness pandemic that we're feeling at the minute, particularly with young people. Moving on to the next, this is a paradigm overview. Gives you an idea of the structure of our learning paradigm. We have 21 elements, which I mentioned. It's divided equally into 3 clusters, so each cluster has 7 elements. Our first cluster is about preparing a learning community for change. Our second cluster is about implementing that model, and then our third cluster is about supporting and sustaining that model. And each element can be considered its own unique roadmap to support educational change, innovation, and progress. So they can be, you don't have to think of this paradigm as every single 21 elements is crucial. Everybody's coming from a different beginning and a different sort of part and different context. So different elements will resonate in different ways. That we have extended writing on each element. I'm not sure whether you can see this if I share my screen here, but this is an example of an element. It's an extended piece of writing that it goes into great depth, and it's supported by research. It's supported by action strategies, as well as strategies to examples around the world of what a new learning paradigm should look like. I'm just trying to get my slides up again. I'm not sure, Walid, oh, here we go. I have to click start again. Here we go. Just be a little second. Okay, here we go. So every element has a headline and overview, a very brief introduction. It has an executive summary, which is a sort of 2-page summary of the whole element. We have a find out more section, which is an extended piece of writing, which goes into great depth about the conceptual frameworks and ideas for each element. We have an act now section, which is actionable strategies to implement that element within your own culture or context. It has examples in action, which I mentioned, examples around the world of what the paradigm, what the elements of each paradigm would look like. And then we have every single element is supported by white academic paper. So we've done that as well to give extra integrity to each element. And moving on to the next, this is our first cluster in a little bit more detail. I'm going to talk you through the 7 elements very quickly. Our first element, join the alliance. We believe that if you want to bring a new learning paradigm to life and sort of implement it around the world, a global network is required. So we work with our alliance network of change makers, thought leaders, education leaders, educators around the world to share the paradigm among the global community, and they help us shape that. Our second element, purpose-inspired learning. We believe that learning should begin with a why and being able to articulate your why. So, you know, in today's education world, we are at a point where education needs to become bespoke and it needs to become highly individualized in order to make it real, in order to engage learners with passion and with sort of their purpose and you know, enable learners to work on and learn what they want to learn. Our third element there is about vision and values, which is an element I think is often overlooked in traditional models, where the vision is often curated and I guess influenced by the government systems, which is often around standardized assessments. So the vision of most learning communities is success through competition, and that derails learning communities from the offset. So we believe that every learning community should establish a very, very unique vision, and that is at an organizational level as well as an individual level. So every organization should have a strong shared vision, and every individual should also have a vision for what they want their learning and how they view their learning to be. And of course, values are a crucial part of that as well, the behavioral sort of and attitudes and mindsets that young people or a learning community will action. So we believe that learning communities should also establish and articulate and communicate various values that are appropriate to their context and culture. Growing positive relationships, another element, is often overlooked as well. We believe that you can deliberately form positive relationships, and I think the old traditional mindset is relationships are incidental, but we believe that relationships can be deliberately formed and fostered in a positive way, and a learning community should be supporting that mindset and framework to create a collaborative environment. Moving on to the next slide. The fifth element in cluster 1 is choosing a growth mindset. We believe that this is really important, that young people and the learning community are exposed to what a growth mindset is. Carol Dweck was the founder of the growth mindset research, and there's a lot of evidence out there to show that people can grow their own thinking and extend and develop themselves with various strategies in place. And to support that, today there is research in neuroscience which discusses and ideates the concepts of neuroplasticity and how you can grow your brain to develop your thinking. So in other words, learning can be deliberately grown, and a learning community should be supporting that. Element 6 is growing an organizational culture and vision. Again, a deliberate concept that culture can be grown. It's not incidental. It's something that with the right strategies in place can be grown, and organizations should be providing the learning community with a positive culture. And again, the vision is really, really crucial for that, to have a strong vision, and where the vision for success in the organization should support that culture. Element 7 is a little different from element 6, although it sounds the same, shaping a strong learning culture. We believe that in a new learning paradigm, the culture of learning needs to be attractive to young people as the societal cultures that they live in. So an example would be the fact that we live in a bespoke world, an on-demand world, where we can't get things at the push of a button for the most part. We do believe that learning cultures should enable young people to decide how they want to learn and what they want to learn. An example would be maybe Netflix, something like that. The Netflix culture, the learning culture needs to go the same way to provide that highly personalized experience. On to our next cluster, implementing the model. This cluster is all about what learning should really look like, and Adria is going to talk you through that in a few minutes. But I'll give you a little bit of an overview of each element. Again, element 8 is very linked to the idea of incidental, moving from incidental to deliberate. The fact that well-being can be developed if learners are exposed to it and understand the various aspects of well-being. And I think there's about 6 areas of well-being off the top of my head that I remember: cognitive well-being, physical well-being, spiritual well-being, emotional well-being, social well-being, and digital well-being. I probably left one out, I'm not sure, but the idea is that these should be deliberately delivered in a learning community to try and enable young people to foster well-being in their lives. Element 9 is, again, going back to that purpose-inspired learning mindset and the idea that learning should become very personal, and the learning community should support every single individual on that journey to becoming what we call a self-determined learner. And the idea of that is if we can create the conditions for self-determination and a community that supports that, then young people will move beyond their formal education years with the skills and competencies to be lifelong learners. I guess another example of that, or an idea around that, is the idea of the adaptive groups, that a learning community needs to enable a peer collaborative framework and sort of environment where young people can go in and out of groups depending on what their needs are. And essentially we're moving from a control model to the empowerment model. And that is a journey. And Adria will probably talk to you a wee bit about that in a few minutes. Our element 10 is diversifying methodologies. We conducted a lot of research around the world and found that initially there were 25 really effective, strong, active learning methodologies that are in practice around the world. And it's since increased to 27 learning methodologies. And these learning methodologies are proven to increase learner development. And I'll give you an example of that would be play-based learning or project-based learning, sustainability-based learning, design thinking, service learning. There's many more. And again, the paradigm is free and accessible to those who join Learnlife as a networker, and you can get access to those methodologies. Element 11, we focus on competencies, skills, and concepts acquisition, and you'll actually notice if you look closely that content is not written there. And in a new learning paradigm, we believe that content should become the byproduct of the learning, and we should be focusing more on competency, skills, and concepts before that. And then in this bespoke world that we're living in an information age, learners should be able to decide on what content they want to attach to their learning experience, which will create intrinsic, extrinsic motivation and engagement, as well as develop agency as well. Moving on to our next slide, element 12, learning experiences. Again, Adria will talk you through that a little bit more, but in any learning community, we believe that the learning experiences should be designed and delivered based on what the needs of the learning community is, and it's not a curriculum. So we don't get a curriculum from the government and then fasten learning around that. We look at what the learning sort of environment is in front of us, and we decide on what learning frameworks should be designed to support learners at their level and what they need. Element 13, online and blended learning. We all know, I'm sure this year after what we've went through globally, what online and blended learning looks like. The idea of being able to move in and out of a remote digital space into the physical space is essentially what we advocate, and we've always advocated that. But to bring that a little bit further, we believe that young people should decide on what blend of online or physical space learning that they want to do. And again, it lends into the idea that the learning experience should be highly individualized to suit the individual needs. Element 14, learning outputs and 360 assessments. This is a really strong element for developing learner accountability. It moves beyond what we used to use in a traditional system of giving out a pupil profile or a pupil report. This is an element where the learners within the learning environment or the learning community, they communicate what their learning is. What that does is it develops self-awareness and accountability at the learner level. And what we find is whenever learners know that they have to communicate what their learning paths are over a 3-month period, usually 3 months, and Adria will probably talk a wee bit more about that, we believe that learners are better prepared and more engaged in their learning throughout the period of 3 months within the semester or term within their community. On the element cluster 3 now. This is all about supporting the model. Our element 15, we're trying to move away from the traditional limited transcript of grading and offering something that is more sort of broad, and we're looking to extend the traditional transcript towards an individual-based portfolio, which is a demonstration of skills, competencies, passions, social and emotional skills, and it's a bespoke blockchain format, so learners have control over what they decide to put that on. So again, it's a really strong, it's a portrait that the learner is in control of, demonstrating who they are. Element 16, our growth programs is all about sort of, I guess, moving away from the traditional model in the sense that we need to think about what the traditional model habits brought and how we need to unlearn and relearn new habits. So we need to relearn how to deliver learning, and our growth programs focus on our elements, and we work with organizations outside of Learnlife to create actionable frameworks for each element that they can bring into the learning communities. And also, even in the community level, growth programs are really crucial because learners can be involved in that too. So the whole community can get involved in what the talent development or the talent opportunities are within the community, and they need to be celebrated, and everybody has a part to play. Element 17 is our creative environment element, and it's all about how we need to reimagine and repurpose and redesign the physical learning environment to suit a new learning paradigm. So, you know, a typical example is the need to move away from the idea that learning should just happen in classrooms, but we should really be thinking about breaking down the walls and creating a collaborative networked environment where learning can happen, you know, as a whole learning community, but also outside the walls of that school, the traditional school system. Element 18, digital platforms, is the idea that, you know, technology should really suit the context and support learning within the unique context and culture of that community. And every single community has specific needs, and digital platforms can support that. So, you know, that to me, that's a real strong indication that this learning paradigm is agile, and we don't advocate that everybody uses a certain learning management system or a certain type of software, but it's all about understanding and actioning within the needs of the learning community. The last few elements before handing over to Adria, we have creative resourcing, the idea that we really need to become creative about how we resource in a learning community. The typical resourcing model was around, you know, buying paper products and textbooks and then using them, and quite often things are thrown out towards the end of a year. Another idea is the fact that a teacher in a traditional model is just seen as a teacher and has a certain sort of job and role and responsibility, but we need to broaden that out and try and look at what the talent is within the learning community and start thinking about how we can resource the learning community with the expertise that is there. And another example, I guess, of creative resourcing is the concept of time, and how we can reframe our use of time within a learning community. And to support that, if you change the environment, the physical environment of the learning community, where teachers are traditionally in a room with learners themselves and have to be there and stay there. Whenever you open up the learning community and network to an open environment, then teachers, or what we call learning guides, can support one another throughout the day, and they can spend time in planning and spend time iterating and prototyping and working with learners in various contexts, and some professional development opportunities as well. Element 20, research and envisioning. This element's all about the idea that if you want a learning paradigm to remain relevant, it has to be continually updated with new research and discoveries that are happening. Element 21, living and learning within 5 life dimensions. That's based on a book by Valerie Hannon, who discusses the idea that in the 21st century, if we want learners to thrive moving into the future, then they need to be able to understand and be aware of the following context, and that is interpersonal development, interpersonal development, social development, global development, and digital development as well. And I'm just going to pass over now to Adria. I'm going to open up the slide, and Adria, are you there and you're happy to take away?
Yes, thank you, Brian. Very happy to be here at EduVation this year. I am Adria. I am one of the learning guides at Learnlife Barcelona, and I'm also the coordinator.
Are there more than 4 people able to go into the room?
Can somebody hear me? Yes, okay, I'm good to go. Okay. So then I'll go back to the slides and take it from where we left off, which is the shift. The main element, like the main touch point of the paradigm is the hub. A hub is what used to be a school, and we're calling it hub to signify that it's a place where lots of people connect and people talk to each other, and it brings in different stakeholders. And in a hub, we have learners, and that could be any age. Learnlife sees learning as a lifelong journey, so it could be a hub for all kinds of ages. At Learnlife Barcelona, we have ages ranging 11 to 20, and I'm the coordinator of the program of learners for somewhere between 13, 14, all the way up to 16, 17. Then again, every learner develops at a different speed and different time, and we don't want to box them by age, but rather provide a 2-3 year program that they can complete in their own time in a more natural way. We have our spaces, which we could show later if people are interested in actually seeing the spaces, but they're full of hands-on studio. So we have the music studio, multimedia studio, 3D modeling and design studio, coding studio, fashion studio. So our learners can really explore their passions by creating relevant projects that are useful for them, meaningful, and really hands-on to get this drive and engagement that people get from actually creating something themselves. And then we have the learning guides, learning guides are more guides and curators of activities than creators of activities, and learning guides really support the learner journey to find what they want to learn and how they want to learn things. Whenever we design learning experiences for our learners, then we use a design thinking approach that puts the learner in the center, and we zero down on their needs at that moment. So things are very adaptable and flexible, and we're always working with the group that we have and not with an established curriculum that is imposed. For this to all work together, the key cornerstone for me, I said there's 2 things. One is the relationships. It needs to be positive relationships between learners and learning guides. If my learners cannot trust me as a guide, they will not enjoy and appreciate the support I give them. At the same time, they will not trust me with their fears, their doubts, and their sharing what's their personal path or goals for me to mentor them and have them through. And that means we are very intentional about building relationships. We spend time and we dedicate occasions to just building relationships with the learners. The other piece is the culture. The culture of learning at Learnlife needs to be as big or bigger and more powerful than any other culture that our learners are immersed in. So they actually can live and breathe in this culture of choosing ambitious goals for yourself. This culture of working hard because you want to achieve things for yourself and not because you want to please somebody else. This culture of taking decisions that are relevant for you, meaningful to you. And we do that by having them reflect on what are their personal goals, long-term, short-term, how they can build towards those goals. We help them build their own individual schedule based on the offers provided in terms of learning activities that are offered in the hub. They can choose different kinds of output. Someone may prefer to have a written piece as a final summary of their project. Someone else may have a video explaining their project as their final piece. The idea is to go, as the slideshow, I'll show it again, from a more created and constricted approach, where we give them things and impose things on our learners, to all the way a point where learners are making their own choices in every area of their learning, and we are there to support that individual personal journey. So that's in essence agency. Learners have agency to take control of their life from a very, very young age, through us training their skills to set goals, plan for those goals, make choices that are meaningful for them, assess what works, what doesn't, explore lots of different passions, zero in on those things that they enjoy the most, and really capitalize on all that really authentic learning to bring in all the concepts and competencies in a way that will actually be engaging for our learners. Since we don't have tons of time, I'll leave it here, and I will be happy to
thank you very much,
questions on this.
Adria and Bryan. Now we will take a few questions, but before we go that, I will make a quick summary of what you, Adri, mentioned, especially about Learning Hub in Arabic, so that everyone can also be on board with what we are saying. مساء الخير. أنا دلوقتي هعمل ملخص سريع للي أدريا وبراين قالوه، خصوصا عن الهب أو اللي هي بيسميها المدرسة. الاسنس أو مركز Learnlife أو قوتهم في إنهم قدروا يحولوا التراديشنال سكول اللي هي عبارة عن مدرسة إحنا بنروحها في مدرسين وإحنا طلبة وفي كلاس روم وفي كوريكولوم او في منهج احنا الطلاب ما لهمش ان هم يتدخلوا فيه، الطلاب بس بيستقبلوا المنهج دوت وبيستقبلوا المواد ديت. حولوه لنيو بارادايم او اتجاه مختلف خالص للتعليم، واللي هو التعليم اللي بيبقى سنترد على الليرنر او المتعلم. ففي Learnlife في الموديل اللي هم عاملينه في برشلونة، السكول ما سموهاش سكول، سموها ليرنينج كوميونتي. التيتشر ما بقاش اسمه تيتشر، بقى اسمه ليرنينج جايد. وادري واحد من الليرنينج جايدز في Learnlife. الطالب ما بقاش اسمه ستودنت، بقى اسمه ليرنر، لان هم بيدوا الطالب القوه وبيدوا له الريسبونسابيلتي او المسؤوليه ان هو يتعلم وان هو يكون شريك في تعلمه ومسيرته التعلميه. طيب ميزه كمان موجوده في Learnlife في برشلونه هو انهم ما عندهمش فصول مبنيه على السنين، عندهم كلاسترز، يعني مرحله عمريه. الليرنرز عندهم من 11 ل 20 سنه تقريبا، وكل مرحله سنتين ثلاثه مدينهم اسم. فمثلا من 11 ل 13 سنه بيسموهم الاكسبلوررز، اللي هم بيروحوا بيبداوا يتعلموا ويبداوا يكتشفوا ايه هي مهاراتهم، ايه هي اهتماماتهم، ازاي ممكن ينموا نفسهم. بعد الاكسبلوررز في الكرييتورز اللي هم بيبداوا يتعلموا حاجات ابلايد شويه. بعد الكرييتورز في التشينج ميكرز اللي هم بيوصلوا لمرحله ان هم عندهم رياده وليدرشيب وسوفت سكيلز بتسمح لهم ان هم يبداوا مشروعات بنفسهم، بتسمح لهم ان هم يبداوا يحدثوا تغيير في المجتمع من حولهم. طيب حاجه ثانيه كمان موجوده في Learnlife ان المنهج مش بس المدرس بيجي ويودي المنهج للطلبه، لا هم بيحاولوا ان هم يعدوا من النقطه ديت لمرحله يكون الطالب فيها ليه قول في الموضوع. مثلا بيستخدموا ديزاين ثينكينج وبيبقى الليرنر في السنتر بتاع المنهج. عندهم فليكسيبل سكيدول، يعني ما فيش سكيدول وان سايز فيتس اول، لا عندهم الليرنر بيختار هو عايز يتعلم ايه وبيختار خلال الاسبوع ايه هو اللي هو عايز ينفذه. بيساعدوا الليرنر او المتعلم ان هو يحدد اهدافه من هو في سن صغير، يحدد اهدافه حتى على الشورت تيرم او على اللونج تيرم. احد الاهداف مثلا ممكن يكون ان انا عايز اتعلم البيانو، احد الاهداف ان انا عايز ابقى اتعلم الفيزيكس واتعلم قوانين معينه، فده هدف بيحطه في الشورت تيرم. وممكن يحدد هدف لونج تيرم، انا عايز ابقى ميوزيشن، انا عايز ابقى متخصص في الروبوتس، فيبدا يخش الروبوت اللاب ويتعلم. طيب احنا ما عرضناش صور، بس انتوا لو دخلتوا على الليرنينج لايف ويب سايت هتلاقوا ان في صور كمان من الكوميونتي، زي حاجه خيال، حاجه فعلا المدرسه او المكان اللي كلنا كنا ممكن نحلم. طيب Adria and Bryan, sorry for the short interruption in Arabic language. We made a summary and we have a few questions for you. First of all, many of the people following us are teachers, okay? And the majority of schools around the world are traditional schools. They are not innovative schools such as Learnlife. So how do you think these schools, and specifically these teachers, can slowly transition from becoming a teacher, someone who just comes and throws content on their learners or the students, to someone who is a learning guide, for example, like you, Adri?
One thing on specifically the teacher aspect, if you start thinking differently, you make this shift from teacher to learning guide. Essentially, it means you have your learners create goals, learning goals, and then you support their journey to those goals. At the start, that means a lot of showing through activities and experiences to the learners how important certain things are for them to naturally want to know more about them. And from there, it's you using your creativity to provide different learning opportunities to achieve different goals in terms of depth or kind of things they're learning in an area. You can do this in your subject and just implement a different range of methodologies, or you can go a bit beyond and break the walls of your subject and team up with other teachers from other subjects to mix up. But the key point is giving up control to the learners, which is a very difficult change of mindset and also requires to train those learners to be able to manage themselves, which is, it's a long process that requires a lot of intentional activities and support, and particularly culture shift. In terms of schools, I think Bryan will be able to say it better than I will. I also think Bryan is not hearing me, so you'll have to ask him yourself.
Yeah, probably. Bryan, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Walid, but I cannot hear Adri.
It's okay. Can you just, because we need to conclude shortly, can you please reply about the part regarding the schools? How can schools, slowly turn or transform into something similar to a learning hub?
Yeah, for sure. It all begins with, first of all, deciding on what the vision for the school is. It all begins there. And it all begins with the perception of what you want for your learners. If you're stuck in the traditional model, which is and the pressure of standardized assessment exists, it can be tricky, but it doesn't mean you can't do that. But it has to begin with those early elements of preparing the community for change. It begins with making sure that the vision that you create in the learning community can support passion and purpose at the individual level, that everybody in the learning community understands the vision and can attach their own personal vision to what the learning vision is for that school community. It's also looking, as I mentioned earlier, about trying to move away from incidental to deliberate exchanges and behaviors. And, a lot of our old paradigm is based on the idea that, we don't have control over certain things like the positive relationships in the community. But if you stop focusing on competition and standardized assessment and start thinking about the wholeness of the individual before the competition and assessment, I think you're moving in the right direction for sure. And you need to think about how you can bring the whole learning community together as well. I think, are we still there, Walid? Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Is there any other questions, Walid, or?
Yeah, we actually have lots of interesting questions. For example, Jihan Ahmed asked about the role of a school principal. Dua asked about the type of resistance you faced in the community, by establishing something as revolutionary or innovative as this one. The only thing I think we have to conclude. So I think we can stay in the room for longer. So for everyone else who would like to stay, we will be very pleased to reply to these questions to you. And also for everyone leaving for the next session, remember that you can always reach out to us. Specifically, you can reach out to Bryan and Adria. You can go to the website of Learnlife or reach out to them on Facebook. We will write down in the chat their emails in case you want to.
Yes, please. That would be great. You added the link on the chat box so that people can reach you for any further information. At the end, thank you so much all, Mr. Walid, Saad. بشكر حضرتك جدا لوجودك حقيقي. Mr. Adria and Mr. Bryan, thank you so much for being with us. We were really delighted to have you on EduVation Summit 2020 for this year. Thank you so much. And yes, I just want to tell you, please press on the X besides webinar jam live broadcast so that we can avoid any technical issues and so that we can keep going on this event.